Welcome everybody. I'm Rifa. I organise SheSays Brighton. I've been doing it for over 10 years now. So welcome to SheSays Brighton for International Women's Day. And we are so excited to be part of Spring Forward Festival for the 8th year running. All through March, you can join free events for women, by women, on digital and tech and creative themes. So if you go to www.wespringforward.com, you can see all the events there, and most of them are free. So tonight I've invited 3 brilliant women to speak. Bear with me while I'm just letting everybody into the call. I've invited 3 brilliant women to speak, each with a fascinating journey. Take a deep breath. Our first speaker is from the world of law. She's the owner of Viv Loves Film, and she's also an executive producer for such productions as Peter Rabbit and the Redwall franchises. She's based in Brighton, but she's totally Hollywood, baby. Please welcome Emma Topping.
Thank you. Hi, guys. What an introduction, Rifa. Hi, everybody. It's really nice to see you, so many glorious women, even if it's just the names on a blank screen at the minute. I appreciate seeing all of you, and I'm really privileged, Rifa. Thank you very much for giving me the time to see you all and have a chat just a little bit about me and my journey. And as Rifa said, I'm really happy just to go through questions. If you've got anything you want to ask or any comments, feel free. It's interesting, I just sort of dashed back today from Screen Film School Brighton, where I lecture at having co-created a new BA Film Business and Production BA Honours degree, which is going live this September. And I'm really passionate about teaching the existing students just about how in storytelling, everything is really influenced around, real world events. And it is, filmmakers, especially students, filmmakers tend to be kind of quite introspective and don't really kind of necessarily have the relationship between their product and what's going out in the outside world. So I take it upon myself really, as it's International Women's Day, but every day when I'm talking, whether it's how to negotiate, whether it is how to collaborate or write a pitch, I will always be I'm very careful about using underrepresented groups, particularly women, as all of the examples. And it's so, it's so interesting because you get these kind of raised eyes, and we talk about women's issues and Me Too and the impact of that on filmmaking. And it's kind of a constant weave that that I'm trying to weave in, because all of this starts at home, in the film industry, from stories and making sure that it's representative in front of the camera and behind the camera. And it's just something I just wanted to mention, because it's really real time, just coming back from encountering some opposition today about, oh, why do we have to talk about all this stuff? This is depressing. Can't we get on with the movies? But so just a quick recap, I guess, in terms of my journey. I have always been in very male, patriarchal dominated, white dominated careers, law being sort of the main one. As a Belfast girl, I know the accent is not as strong as it was. My mother was South African, so this is sort of what you get when you cross Rondebosch, Cape Town with Belfast. I studied law, not because I wanted to, but because I was the youngest of 3 daughters, and the eldest 2 did what they chose, and my father and my grandfather were lawyers, and so it was law for you. I went to law school reluctantly, and ended up graduating in about 93, when one of the biggest recessions was hitting, before we knew about, obviously, 2008 and so on and so forth. And I ended up, after a bit of a struggle, first of all representing Lloyd's of London's action groups against Lloyd's, when there was some big litigation and the 90s when they lost lots of money. But again, it was a very kind of privileged male. A lot of the Lloyd's names mostly were men or wives of rich men who had signed all of the risk into the woman's name. And that was my first kind of, working in the city, just really kind of seeing how the odds were in Hunger Games speak, not in your favor if you were a woman working in the city. I found in the 90s just a very sort of difficult environment for a woman, especially a woman that had a lot to say and was not the sort of typical law graduates from I think they were used to seeing. To compound matters, I went into banking, which was repeated instances of not being invited on golf days because it was only men. Men going to strip clubs at lunchtime and coming back with clients, and just such a very odd sort of patriarchal culture. And from that, I wanted to indulge my passion of going into the entertainment industry, because I was always passionate about film. And my South African mother, who I mentioned, who is Viv, was passionate about film, hence the name of my company after my dear departed mum, Viv Loves Film. So first I went to work for Andrew Lloyd Webber's really useful group, which was phenomenal, because first introduction to working with you can imagine, predominantly gay industry, very creative, very passionate, a complete opposite from what I had been used to, suited and booted, male dominated, aggressive banking industry and legal system. And then through that, I went to work at Disney, and a long route through, worked for a couple of major publishers, the most recent one being Penguin Random House, doing all of their book to film series, video games, stage productions. And through kind of just hustling, really became involved in the creative side and became exec producing the Peter Rabbit feature franchise and the new Netflix feature and series productions, which are in development, which is really exciting with Netflix in LA, and started my own, left corporate, and just I saw a lot of lip service throughout my corporate, not just the most recent employer, but a lot of tokenism, a lot of words not backed up by action, whether it was supporting women or gender or non-binary or race, but not a lot of action. And I found it quite frustrating. And so for better or for worse, I thought, throw my hands up in the air. 2020, I left in January, and then the rest is history. But really, it's been the most liberating experience, because through my own company, the connections I forged predominantly with Hollywood and New York, weirdly, even though I'm Brighton based, about 85%, maybe 90% of my work is done stateside. And it's just as a more open and collaborative space, I feel. And I'm being able to affect change. I'm able to pursue clients, authors, stories that are amplifying the communities that I want to serve and support, and also create new generations of readers. We're launching, I don't know if you know, Rifa, the Brighton Book Festival with Afrori Books, who are the first Black indie publishers in Brighton, partnered with the Feminist Bookshop, which is also an indie Brighton-based feminist bookshop. So it's so great just being able to support, be a part of, use your experience over those years, for something to really kind of generate change and to finally be able to promote those stories. So I hope that's kind of just a bit of an introduction into what we do at Viv Loves Film. And it's just kind of, I'm really interested in collaborating with women and just really hearing stories and everyone else's experience.
Thank you so much, Emma. Your enthusiasm for your the industry is just springs off the screen. Has anyone got any questions? Please chuck them in the chat. I feel like I have loads of questions, like how is one of the things when we met, you talked about the process, like of what you're focusing on is graphic novels at the moment. Which graphic novels well, if you can say, I'm sure there's are inspiring you at the moment, because I'm banging to Station 11 at the moment, and that series, and that's got all this, you can just see how the merch stuff is just
absolutely out. I mean, graphic novels are just fabulous, because, you know, I love all my collaborators in the film industry, but because everyone is busy, especially as things gear up again, everyone's lazy and time pressured. So in graphic novels, when you are kind of pitching to Hollywood to create a film out of, or a TV series, or a series, I should say, not TV, that's kind of redundant now, out of a story, what better way than basically to have a storyboard of the film that they're going to see, which is what a graphic novel is. And there are so many myriad editions who I represent exclusively through Viv Loves Film, have really got some wonderful stories in graphic novel form. Jenny Robbins' Biscuits, Assorted Biscuits, is fantastic. It's promoting gritty, several different stories of women in London, and the idea of them being like biscuits, cookie cutter version of women. So clever, so strong. Hannah Berry, who's who's recently departed, not in a dead way, but just because her reign has ended, 2019 to 2021 UK Comic Laureate, which is really impressive for a woman to receive that accolade in what is kind of traditionally a male-dominated space. Her works are kind of satirical Charlie Brooker, very clever steering social commentary with a bit of horror mixed in, which is my jam. I'm obsessed with horror. Anyone who knows anything about me and Viv Loves Film and my mother will know that I was brought up on Friday the 13th and Texas Chainsaw Massacres when I was about 7 years old. So it's kind of stuck. So there's so many wonderful graphic novels all across, the different genres. And I must admit, I'm not going to lie, when I first thought about graphic novels, my first thought was, my God, it's going to take so much less time to read. They're so much easier and straightforward. And in fact, they've become much more sophisticated, really, than Beano, which is what I grew up on at the time. But yes, they're really wonderful. I wonder if any of your attendees are into graphic novels. It's because again, it's sort of the remit that you feel of kind of guys in almost like record shops, isn't it? There's that dusty comic. So I've got my dogs are kind of feeding in. I think there's somebody knocking on my window. Sorry. I hope that's it. She's got a lot to say.
It's totally fine. These things happen, right? So I've got a few questions. Yes, I was in the record shop. I was in the comic book shop today in Brighton, and it does feel a bit like that. Although things are changing, but they used to have, in the one that I'm sure you all know who I'm talking about, they used to have a section that was women's section, and it was like, they have an LGBTQ section, but the women's section has gone now, because it's not just for women.
I'm so sorry to interrupt, Rifa. This guy's just banging on my window.
Go ahead. And I'm just gonna look at these questions for you. I'll sort all of this out in the edit. Thank you, Vicky, for your question. Yes. She says, sadly, I had some similar experiences around the golf days in the 90s. I'm going to ask Stephanie in a minute about golf, because I got a lovely email from her about changing the face of golf for
so sorry. He wasn't giving up. That's the joys of doing Zooms and Amazon deliveries. Sorry, guys.
Fair enough. It's probably a really, really exciting graphic novel that you've got to give me.
I think it's some face cream.
Oh, excellent.
When you get to my age, whatever works.
Exactly. So Vicky from Fugu says that sadly she had some similar early experiences around golf days in the 90s, but glad that things have visibly improved. And Angela Arnold says, Emma, what was the common challenge you faced throughout your journey?
Oh, I think people, and almost, you know, I hate to say, there's a special place in hell for women who don't support women in the corporate world. There is the common theme I will always say, and I still encounter it, is the kind feedback of be a little less you, Emma. I have been told that to stop taking up space, you're too loud, who do you think you are? Which is, to be frank, why most of my time I spend working in Hollywood with a culture that is much more open to the reality of who I am, which is, sort of a proud, queer, bolshy woman who's not afraid to have an opinion, but who was afraid, frankly, for many years, but used to just being sort of silenced for a while, which, you know, I'm not going to lie, you know, there was, you may do the brave face, but you go and cry in the old cubicles in corporate. Those days have gone. And I think it is just that criticism of just, you know, stay in your lane, which is a real issue, especially in the film industry here, television and broadcasting and film industry in the UK, I find, which is a disdain and dislike, which is very kind of closed shop generally anyway, but there's a disdain for multi-hyphenates, by which I mean such as myself, entertainment lawyer, hyphen, exec producer, hyphen, business owner, can't stand it. Stay in your lane, you know, jack of all trades, master of none, you're on our turf. Whereas I don't know whether it is part of the culture of American dream, in a way, go get it. It's you're encouraged to, you know, because the way it is, a multi-hyphenate's way of intending it is, I'm happy to roll up my sleeves, show me where, and unintentionally that makes people uncomfortable. And I have only recently in the last few years been very comfortable with making people uncomfortable. And if that is what it takes, you know, I won't be to sound like Glenn Close, you know, put in a corner. I'm not going to be ignored, damn it.
There's a question here about being pushy. So Helen says, it's great to hear your experience. Thanks for sharing. You described how you got into producing by hustling, but how did you do that without coming across as too pushy?
I was viewed as too pushy. the very, you know, and to be honest, I should be able to be proud to say this, but I just still find it a little bit toe-curling. I'm good. I'm really good. When I made the move from a banking lawyer to work for Lloyd Webber's Relief for Group, I knew next to nothing. Well, I knew absolutely nothing about musicals. In my interview, I waxed lyrical when I was asked what was my favorite Andrew Lloyd Webber musical. I would talk about Miss Saigon repeatedly until it was kindly pointed out that that was our competitor Cameron McIntosh. And not the smartest move, thank you, Jonathan Hull, who gave me my job, and regardless, because of my dogged determination elsewhere to make up. But I knew nothing about copyright, theatre industry. So I sat down, shut up, and absorbed everything and asked questions. And what I did know was, you know, how to protect the company from risk if somebody went under, because that's all I knew. That was kind of banking stuff. And just always made myself available to get involved. And that put some people's noses out of joint. That put a lot of people's noses out of joint. And the fact that I could get on well with people, that also annoyed a lot of people. So, you know, the more when you sharpen your elbow, you know, you might stab a few people on the way, but not with intent. It's, you know, there's plenty, there's that classic thing, isn't it? There's plenty of pie to go around. Just because I want some doesn't mean you get less, but people are fearful. And, you know, that where there is privilege in a corporate or in an industry, it is usually because it's populated by reasonably mediocre people. and who are threatened by people saying, oh, you know, I don't have an agenda, I just am passionate about it, can I come in? And you're going to encounter resistance, so don't stop hustling. But you know, you won't be liked unless you have women. You know, there is a new generations of women who are coming up, who are much more collaborative. You know, in my day, there were some exceptions, but generally speaking, the women who were ahead, whether it's that Margaret Thatcher attitude where, oh, I'm pulling up the ladder behind me when I go up. And that is not the case. And I make it my mission. There are still film students, are still predominantly male, white cis male. I make it my mission to see the woman or the underrepresented voices and, you know, bring them into the conversation. There are more people like me. That is where it starts in education. And that's why part of the reason I feel really passionately about sort of going into education in my area. It's, you know, one thing to do deals and be kind of far removed, but it's another thing, you know, really to affect change. You start, and getting representation on screen, on television, starts with the stories and the students now that I'm teaching.
Fantastic answers. I mean, we could go on and on with you. I think we've got 2 more speakers to come, but I love talking to you. I just got another question from Natalie Burns, who wants me to tell you, you know, she's massively into graphic novels, particularly non-fiction and autobiographical. And Helen Diplock also says her daughter, who's 8, has inherited her love of the Beano, and they both love a graphic novel. But Natalie asks, confronting such a patriarchal structure on a day-to-day basis can be exhausting, and add on top of that, the film and legal industries are incredibly competitive, sometimes with super long hours. How do you go about managing your own time and well-being in that environment?
Oh, sometimes I don't. Hilariously, I delivered a lecture last week. It was a whole module, and it was called Avoid the Overwhelm. In a week last week where I was completely overwhelmed, you know, just not to go into the details, but I've got an elderly dog that was very ill, and I thought was going to have to get put down. She's rallied, you heard her momentarily go, so very much found her voice again, but we don't say be little less you, Connie, keep barking. But I found with the pandemic and also a shift from being a lawyer and being corporate into a more creative exec producing, reading, creating pitches, pitching, talking to people in the industry, being an exec producer in the industry, my diligence has been lost somewhere. I don't know whether it's menopause, I don't know whether it's COVID, I don't know whether it's that transition, maybe all of the above. But I find it much harder to be on top of a to-do list and to schedule things. So frankly, what I have to do is what I've done, in fact, I have it here. I've had to actually buy a retro physical planner. None of this thingy in my mobile. Oh, sound like, you know, I've got a mobile here, I've got a Mac there, I've got bits of paper, I've got, you know, write on my dog. I've gone old school, and I have got a planner, and I write on it just 3 things a day. The list is long and much longer than 3 things, but I just write 3 things I have got to do, and that's it. And I just chill out after that. It may mean I work all weekend, but it's small, it's focused. The lists itself has been paralyzing me. My desktop has never been so littered. The inboxes have not been sorted. I'm learning to embrace that sometimes when I kind of talk to myself and say, this is the new you. It's okay not to be that obsessed with cleaning the desktop. You're putting too much pressure on yourself. Calm down. Look, if anything's taught us anything, life is too short. Don't sweat the small stuff. Really, a few things on the desktop, whatever, you know, life goes on. Read a book, chill out, or like me, have a nap, and then end up napping for maybe 12 hours.
Fantastic, Emma. Emma, all your advice and your story is so brilliant, and we've all really enjoyed hearing from you. Thank you so much for taking the time out to talk to us. I hope you'll stay on the call.
Of course.
While we talk to the other speakers, and maybe we have a little chat after as well. That'd
Absolutely.
Be really nice.
Thank you, guys.
Loads of people wanted to meet you as well. So
thank you. And you just get in touch. Honestly, you know, I'm on LinkedIn or find the website. I'd love to hear from you and all your stories.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Emma Topping.
Thank you, guys.
So our next speaker is the operations director of Brighton-based games company, Hangar 13. She runs the Women in Games Brighton meetup, and she also worked for Creative Assembly, which is up the road in Horsham, and she worked for Disney as well. And she is passionate about making the games industry more diverse. Please welcome Rebecca Sampson.
That was awesome. Thank you, Rifa. Hi. Hi, everybody. And thank you, Emma, for your talk. That was awesome. Really, really interesting to hear your background and just all of the many amazing things that you've been doing. I'm just going to share my screen quickly because I have some basic slides that I will share. But yeah, so when Rifa asked me to do this talk tonight, there was a few things that kind of ran through my head. One of them was, wow, I'm honoured. There's such a fantastic list of speakers that were performing that I was slightly intimidated. So my other kind of thought was, why me? And then I thought, actually, why not me? And I think imposter syndrome gets talked about a lot because I think it resonates with a lot of people, and women in particular. And I went to a talk this weekend, actually, where one of the speakers, Karen Dobres, she's on the board of directors at Lewis FC. And so she said, when referring to imposter syndrome, that it's not a syndrome because you are an imposter. And the context that she was talking about at the time was women's football, but actually this could probably be said for a lot of industries, and in particular, so tech, digital, and games being among them. So I want to just move into a little bit of detail about myself, give you a bit of background. So as we've said, I'm the operations director at Hangar 13. It's a AAA game studio known for the Mafia Games franchise and part of 2K family. And it's based in Brighton, but we do have site locations in California and 2 in the Czech Republic. So part of my role is to run the global operations with focuses on studio cohesion for the sites, collaboration, EDI, so equality, diversity and inclusion, as well as managing the local facilities and IT departments. I've got experiences in multiple areas. So in a way, I guess a bit of a multi-hyphen within the operations function. So a lot of these can cover finance, facilities, health and safety, office fit out, space planning, design, events, corporate social responsibility, and also corporate partnerships. And I think one of the kind of the great things about starting a career off in admin or office management is that you get to pick up a lot of different skill sets and knowledge in a variety of different areas. And operations is normally seen as the go-to team to take on any new tasks that there isn't necessarily a designated person for. So you kind of take up all of these skills. And it can be fantastic for variation, but it can also get quite overwhelming, especially when you are given too much in one go. But I've been privileged to have worked in the games industry for 14 years now, starting what I kind of thought was my dream career in games as a front of house administrator. And this was for a studio called Black Box Studio, which was part of Disney Interactive. And that was on a 1-month temporary contract, which luckily got turned into a permanent role. And that was just 3 days in. So I was very, very happy. And back then, the games industry was quite different. There was probably around maybe 5-10% women compared to the 26% that there is today, which is still low. But it is significantly better than what it has been. And we're still kind of working to increase that number and to improve it. And so I was at Black Box Studio for 4 years before Disney unfortunately decided to close the studio. So I said goodbye to Disney, but I said a welcome hello to Sega's Creative Assembly. And I joined there back in 2011 as their office coordinator. So there was 160 staff and a couple of floors that they occupied in one building. And during my 7 years there, which might seem like quite a long stint at one company, I oversaw and ran around 7 expansion fit out projects. I grew my team from 1 to 5, supported the studio's growth. So they grew from 160 to 500 plus. And we ended up moving from 1 building to 3 buildings, one of which was a motion capture studio as well, which I had a hand in kind of managing and project managing that fit out. And I also managed the operations team and facilities of all the spaces, finally finishing up with my final role there as head of operations. So working in games, you know, it's not been without its challenges, and there's definitely been numerous occasions where I've had things mansplained to me, especially working along with kind of build, construction and maintenance contractors. And also when there's been occasions where I've asked for promotions, already doing the job for like 1 to 2 years, you know, I've essentially been told to prove myself in that role to show that I can do the job before given the opportunity to earn the title and the salary with it. And I think this is sometimes, unfortunately, common for women to experience, having to prove yourself first before you're kind of given the job to try. And it's also been hard at times to have autonomy, for somebody to trust in your knowledge and your expertise. And myself and colleagues, we've also experienced throughout our careers of men being disinterested in an idea given by us, but then only to love it when it's been reworded and pitched from a male colleague. I don't know if anybody else has experienced that before, but it can happen quite a lot. So you kind of have to point it out and stand your ground. But it has taught me some key lessons working in the games industry, especially in the earlier years when diversity and inclusion campaigns and initiatives were not very common. Nobody knew when D&I, what it stood for. So one of the kind of the lessons I learned was to learn to say no, to also speak up and not be afraid to voice my opinions, to call it out if I heard something that I felt was wrong, perseverance and also resilience. And despite the challenges, it has been, you know, an incredibly rewarding industry to work for. And this is mostly due to like the incredible diverse individuals whom the games industry welcomes. Although, you know, nobody is perfect, and we all need to continue educating ourselves, myself included, asking questions, having an open mind, and sometimes even looking inwards at ourselves on how we can change, which can sometimes be a painful exercise, but a necessary one in order to be able to be the change needed. So after my relatively long stint at Creative Assembly, the time felt right to kind of move on to a different studio to help find its feet and grow. And that's where I got contacted about Hangar 13 opening up a Brighton studio. So I left my team and my work wife at Creative Assembly and joined Hangar 13's Brighton studio. And the team there was 13 people when I started, and it was just in a small leased office space. But we're now 100 plus in new offices by Brighton Station. And we've got things like a gaming room, a library, a gym, canteen, sound rooms, cinema rooms. And we are also about to celebrate our 4th anniversary, which is super exciting. So it's been this role in particular that's provided me with a lot of autonomy and also the platform to be able to be involved with a diversity and inclusion strategy for the company. It's also allowed me to create important corporate partnerships and relationships with many not-for-profit organisations within the games sector. And as Rifa mentioned, I've done a lot of work for the Women in Games organisation. So I'm a member of the advisory board as an ambassador as well. And I've worked with them on numerous events and campaigns, and in particular, the Women in Games monthly networking events, just because Brighton is so full of game studios, large and small. And also the universities, we get a lot of students studying computer topics, so they're really interested in meeting the developers at the same time. Along with the Women in Games, I've also worked quite closely with the team at BAME Games. So they organise meetups, talks and mentoring as well from people from underrepresented and underprivileged backgrounds. And similar to that, there's also an organisation called Into Games who have a similar focus and have an emphasis on access into games with very strong educational backgrounds. So they help organise like virtual work experiences and game jams for students and young people wanting to get into games. And I also am a special effects ambassador. Now, Special Effects are an absolutely incredible organisation. They help bring the enjoyment and love of video games to physically disabled people. And if you haven't heard of any of these organisations, I really do urge you to check them out, because they're all doing some truly fantastic things for the games industry and for the people that love games. And in addition to building relationships and partnerships with the not-for-profit organisations, I also work quite closely with UK as an EDI committee member. So there's a group of us and we help provide advice to the games trading body on diversity and inclusion. And then lastly, to kind of finish this up, I also help mentor as part of Limit Break's mentorship program. And Limit Break was started by a fellow woman in games just off of her own back. And now I think it's got over 700 members that join this. And I think there's such a huge value and return on mentoring and coaching women within the tech sector. And I really, really do hope that I can continue to do that for as long as possible. And platforms like Limit Break really allow that to happen. So that is kind of incredible what they're doing. And so when preparing for this talk, I was thinking about a lot of things and what I could have as my focus and things that I thought might be relevant. And topics came to mind such as emotional intelligence, psychological safety, because there's a lot about, you know, feeling safe and having that trust with your organization, imposter syndrome. All of these are great topics with a lot of stuff that could be said about them. But when I kind of thought back about my journey through my career in games and what my values are right now, one of them that really resonates with me is being authentic. And so from the words of Daniel Goleman, who's a psychologist known for his work on emotional intelligence, he said, being authentic is to be the same person to others as you are to yourself. And I think being an authentic leader is becoming more of a popular term now with senior professionals trying to adopt this way of leading. And I think the pandemic and lockdown has definitely helped that, as it's kind of stripped away some of those barriers between personal and professional life. And I think it's helped bring everybody down to the same level, regardless of seniority. And I'm a real strong believer in authentic leadership. And I've always chosen to lead by example with integrity and empathy. And being a woman in senior position within the tech kind of game sector has kind of made me realize that I feel like I owe it to other women in the industry to be the best role model that I can be. And I don't believe that you can do that by hiding your true self. And, you know, everybody is a role model to somebody, whether you realize it or not. And so I think Rifa mentioned about like who were the inspirational women to me, and you know, alongside the incredible women in the games industry who are just, you know, there's some fantastic women out there that are doing epic things and campaigning for diversity and inclusion. But there's another woman working in tech world who is Jacqueline De Rogers. So she's the president at Tech UK, and she went through her own journey in her career of realizing actually that she was a woman trying to be a man in a man's world and had self-limiting beliefs that she had to be a man to succeed. And Jacqueline kind of mentions in a recent interview that it's actually easier and simpler when you're your kind of authentic self. And so that kind of leads me to some tips that I'd like to just share with everybody. So the first one is to stick to your values and know your worth. You know, don't change to fit a company. And I think there's a lot of businesses that have been using the term cultural fit and looking for people that kind of fits within their culture, when actually what they should be doing is finding somebody who can improve and add to that. And I think by that, you know, stay true to your values and don't be afraid to stand up for them, and also know your worth. You know, if a company doesn't see the benefit of having you work for them, then, you know, it's their loss, and don't let that kind of hold you back. So my next one is to make connections. And networking, it shouldn't be a scary experience. It's more about just making new connections, whether it's personally or professionally. You know, you might not find your people every time, but I don't think that should, you know, put you off. My kind of advice is to, even if it's just to make that one connection at an event, like it's one more connection than what you had yesterday. And so my next one is set some time aside for reflection. And I think, you know, reflecting and stopping and having a look at what you've done and what you've achieved and how you got there, like it can be overlooked a lot. So it's really important to set some time aside so that you can learn from that experience, and you can also grow from it. And reflection, you know, it can not only be used for projects, but it can also be used for self-reflection as well. Whether it's kind of stopping and thinking about revealing some of the truths about yourself that you didn't realize, or maybe revealing areas where you need to apply kind of more personal development to. So I really feel like that's quite an important one to stick to. And this next one is one of my mantras that I try to stick by, and that's challenge your fears. And that is actually me in that picture, standing on a single wire across a very, very high drop. And I kind of believe, like, if you don't do things to just kind of push yourself slightly outside of your kind of comfort zone, like, you're not going to grow. So think doing things that will scare you, or just kind of, you know, push the boundaries a little bit, like you'll end up surprising yourself, I think, of what you can achieve and where things will lead. And then my final one is to be unapologetically you. So be yourself, be authentic, be awesome, be you, and stop saying sorry. And I'm definitely been guilty of that. So I just think everybody should think they're a fantastic human being, and so don't be afraid to let the world know that. And I just wanted to finish on, as it was International Women's Day, with a quote from Audrey Hepburn, who says, "Nothing is impossible. The word itself says I'm possible." And I think everybody should remember that next time the imposter syndrome kind of creeps in. Thank you. And I think I've been rambling on.
Thank you so much, Rebecca. That was so lovely. Thank you so much, because I love that the journey took you from, like, your dream job was already, like, you'd already achieved it when you had that like the first job that you had, and you were working
in Black Rock.
And was that because you were a massive gamer yourself and you wanted to get into the industry?
Yeah, I grew up playing console games, and my mum was fortunate enough to win a console when me and my brother were really young. So kind of ended up winning a Super Nintendo, and just that was it. It started the passion.
That's amazing. People have said, you know, Vicky from Plus Accounting says you have a clear passion for the gaming sector. It's great to see all the different areas you're involved with. Very impressive. And Amy Lauren Martin says, so amazing to see how many initiatives for minorities there are in the gaming industry. It must be exciting to get involved in such an active diversity and inclusion drive. And you are trailblazing, she says.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I mean, there's so many organizations out there that are doing, like, truly fantastic things for the industry. Like, sometimes it's hard to almost pick as to who you can help, because there's so many. But yeah, I tried to, you know, get involved with as many as I possibly can, even if it's just, you know, doing some mentoring or offering some gifts for them to, you know, use as their game jams, or, you know, getting staff to do talks and things. So
it's really is fantastic, and we all like time poor, so to see that long list of things, and I know a lot of them are national incentives as well, so initiatives even. Yeah, Katrina says it's easy to forget how much difference we can and do make by being our authentic selves, especially in male dominated industries. Yeah, I think it's definitely important to be seen to be doing that, and you sort of give permission to everybody else to do it as well, which is so important. Thank you so much, Rebecca. I don't know, you were going to say something else then?
No. Oh no, I was just going to say about being authentic.
Hard, isn't it? For years, that took me years to understand. You don't have to keep yourself.
I mean, I've been doing games for 14 years, so it's taken me a while to finally, you know, learn how to hold my ground and to be authentic, and to actually realize that being upset or being, you know, empathetic, it's okay.
Yeah, it's really, really important. Making connections, networking, soft skills, which people didn't always rate, and actually it's our superpowers. Okay, thank you so much, Rebecca. It's lovely to hear from you, and I know we'll hear more from you in the future. So if we you hang on the call, maybe we'll have a little chat afterwards. Change my setting, and we'll speak to our next speaker. So our final speaker, we met at an award ceremony, a glamorous award ceremony I've written here, and we've been friends ever since. She's on the Culture and Community Committee for Brighton Council. She's a marketing manager at Healy's law firm, and she was Miss Sussex 2 years running. I hope this introduction is all right. Let's see what she has to say about it. Please welcome Stephanie Pryor.
Thank you so much, Rifa, and good evening, everyone. Some strong presentations to follow on from. I'm going to attempt to tell my life story in about 10 minutes with a focus on representation, race, and relate my story to this year's theme for International Women's Day, Breaking the Bias. So just to start by providing some background, for those of you who don't know me, I'm a local Brighton-based business development and marketing manager for a Sussex and London-based international law firm called Healy's LLP, which specialises in commercial and corporate law. I've been working with the firm now for just over 3.5 years, specialising in their digital marketing, brand marketing, as well as exploring and executing ways to support business plans and raising profiles for key partners within the firm. I've worked in legal services for approximately 10 years now. And just like Rifa, whenever possible, I try to use my marketing position to promote good business and support initiatives that support diversity and inclusion within our community and business community. And this has led me to host and support a range of successful events and establish a strong network, especially within the Women in Business Network. In addition to my role at Healy's, I'm also a TV producer and presenter for Latest TV. And I also am a standing invitee on the Tourism, Equality, Culture and Communities Committee for Brighton Hove City Council, such a mouthful, which basically means that I am a non-elected member who sits with councillors and directors, and where possible, I hold them accountable and try and make influence with regards to reports and decisions that affect our local community. Now, I was appointed in 2020 and became the first woman of Black heritage to take a seat at a committee for Brighton Hove City Council, which still sounds so weird and alien to say in this modern day and age, right? But nevertheless, I've used my role to try and show that, well, try and speak up and stand up for changes that I wish to see in my community, but also try and highlight that organisations like Brighton Hove City Council should embrace inclusion and diversity. And through my position, I've tried to highlight that there is added value through me being there. Now, it's not easy to be that one person in the room speaking to people that have got way more power than you, and they don't have to listen to you. And I only recently watched myself back in committee. But nevertheless, it made me smile to watch me being my authentic self in that environment. And I do believe that my experience and my authenticity supports good debate. I'm present and I contribute, and this supports better decision making. Now, Brighton is a fantastic city, and there's much evidence to highlight that we are modern and diverse as a city. For example, our choice of local MPs, the fact that we host one of the most successful Pride events in Europe, we host naked bike rides, we lead on tech, tourism and more. But when it comes to embracing the city's cultural history and its people, arguably we've been quiet to do this. So it's been a pleasure to try and make influence to the anti-racist pledge where possible. And sorry, just to go back, I've actually written a lot about representation in magazine articles, in magazine blogs that I write in every month for SBT magazine. I've written an article about why representation matters, and also various other articles with regards to being a leader, a boss, a female boss, you know, within business environments. Now, I'm really passionate about representation and I enjoy marketing. For me, it's a powerful communications tool that can be used to create change and challenge perceptions and values. And I believe that throughout history, sexism and racism have operated like businesses, and in many ways they've been marketed to us. And this affects our decisions, values and perceptions within our communities. And if we are to challenge common stereotypes that support a lack of leadership, or even ideologies that support what is beautiful, what is intelligent, or what is a social norm, then we need to consider where these ideologies came from. And I do believe that representation is key. Now, they say seeing is believing. So what did you see growing up? Now, I grew up in West Sussex, Littlehampton. My grandma was the first woman of Black heritage to reside in the seaside town in the 80s. And as a result, my mum and her auntie experienced a lot of racism, not just from students, but sometimes from teachers and adults too. And unfortunately, not a lot had changed in the 90s when I attended school. I went to Littlehampton Community School. I'm not sure if it's still called that. And at the time there was 2,000 students and I was one of few people of colour. And as a result, I did experience a lot of ignorance and racism. When I was 13, my mum decided that it was time to leave Littlehampton, and she chose Brighton for its diversity and modernity. But unfortunately, within a few years, I became a stereotype that I would then later try and do everything in my power to change. I came out of school with just 2 GCSEs above C grade, a bad attitude and little prospects. In many ways, I was lost. And like many young people and also adults, I didn't know what I wanted to do, but I knew that I didn't want to be a failure. And after being walked off the school grounds and being told that I needed to consider a different alternative to education, that lack of belief in myself was exactly what I needed to spur me on to believe in me. And 5 years later, I left Goldsmiths University of London with a academic higher division degree in anthropology. The first bit of advice I would give today is believe in yourself. Even though I managed to get to university, I still didn't study law or journalism or politics, areas that I've actually ended up working in and being paid for in my later years, because my working class attitude told me that I didn't have the connections to persevere within these particular fields. So I picked a subject that I believe that I could transfer into different areas, and it could open a variety of doors, and which it did. But nevertheless, you know, if I was to have a word with my younger self or advise another woman considering a different career prospect or education route, I would definitely say, remember how great you are and everything that you've done to get to that point before you tell yourself that you don't have what it takes for that next step or goal. Now, through my passion to represent myself and my cultural identity, in my late teens and 20s, I decided to give modelling a go. And this led me onto beauty pageants. Now, I've kind of fast forwarded a little bit, but one of the reasons why this was quite important for me to do is growing up in Littlehampton, there was a severe lack of representation. And I remember acknowledging that there wasn't anybody like me on TV or in the media. And it went further than that. I mean, there was no representation in terms of products, beauty products and hair products. If I had to travel up to London and stock up on a year's worth of products, you know, to basically maintain my hair and beauty, this is before the days of Amazon and when Boots in recent years modernized its product range. So yes, I went for pageantry, and I decided that as a woman of colour, I would have a better chance at a black-led pageant. So I went for Miss Jamaica UK. Now, I didn't win, but I learned a lot from the experience. I was informed after the pageant that it was likely that I didn't win because I was too political. My hair was braided, and they would have preferred it if it was straight or weaved, and my dress wasn't wow enough. And in many ways, I think this was the beginning for me of suffering with imposter syndrome, because I put myself in an environment where I was directly being judged, and I forgot that these are just opinions. A few months later, I competed for Miss Sussex, and I took a different approach. So I got my hair weaved, I wore a sparkly gown, and I didn't talk about world peace, but I was positive. I toned myself down. And I won. I became the first woman of Black heritage to win the title of Miss Sussex and become an ambassador. And this led me to compete in Miss England. And if I'd won that, I would have gone on to compete in Miss World and been the first woman of Black heritage to ever represent our country in either of the two leading pageants, Miss England and Miss Universe Great Britain. Now, that wasn't meant to be, and I was given the opportunity to compete for another 3 years in Miss Universe Great Britain. And in many ways, I applied the similar attitude to how I entered Miss Sussex, constantly taking on feedback and criticisms that had been presented to me. And no matter how much I tried and applied myself, and also tried to explain why I was there, I wasn't there in vain, I was there with a purpose. People weren't ready to hear that at that particular time. And it's funny because I entered my 20s with a lot of confidence in me and probably a lot of naivety as well. If I didn't see it, I generally thought that if I applied myself, I could change it. But unfortunately, I left my late 20s questioning myself and whether I was good enough. Was I too big? Was I too small? Was it my hair? Was it my personality? Could I even be representative of England? And I could go on and on about my experiences of beauty pageants, the highs and the lows. But what is important to me upon years later of reflection is that I did actually make my own her story. When competing, my great auntie Winsome, who's a member of the Windrush generation, she's my Jamaican auntie, and when explaining to her what I was doing, she said to me, do you know that I have never had the opportunity, I could have never have done, even if I wanted to, what you're doing now. So keep living our dreams and keep living your dreams. Now, until recent years, there wasn't even a place or recognition for different variations of beauty in national beauty competitions as well as commercial media. So I achieved by just turning up and taking a seat at the table. I also received a lot of feedback, positive feedback from young women who had never considered such a platform and wanted advice on how to compete. And others who informed me that it was powerful for them and their children to see little old me representing my purpose and dreams on national and international platforms. And it took a while to take pride that I didn't do that in vain. It was with it, I did it for a purpose, and I should be proud of what I've achieved rather than what had been lost. And this is something that I always try to achieve in my work in local politics, TV, and as a marketing specialist. I think it's not only important that we see women in business lead and in other platforms, but it's very powerful when we see something or somebody that represents ourselves. It highlights a standard, one that is within our reach and can spur on bigger dreams and aspirations. Now, with regards to imposter syndrome, going back to that, and I'm no expert in this, and I know a lot of leading women in business and men have struggled and suffered with this. And I definitely don't have all the answers, but what I do know and remind myself of all the time is that I only have control of me. And it's my responsibility to turn up and show that, you know, my authenticity has a place at that pageant, meeting or event, that my voice in committee counts, that I bring valuable suggestions to business meetings. I deserve and I am entitled to that pay rise I'm asking for. I have the experience to speak at events like this and more, and it's my responsibility to break the bias, which takes me on to my next bit of advice. Never talk yourself out of an opportunity. I see so many women in business talk themselves out of speaking opportunities or marketing opportunities because they don't feel that they have what it takes at that time to go with that opportunity. If it wasn't for you or you weren't good enough, it wouldn't be in front of you. It wouldn't have been presented to you. So I believe that you should always rise to the occasion, especially when it supports your personal growth and development. Now, this year's International Women's Day is about breaking the bias, and I hope that my story and experiences highlight the importance of representation, but also having confidence in you and how important it is to know that you and everything that makes you, negative and positive, is significant to your legacy and your ability, so rise to it. And I would just like to conclude by saying that it's us, we have the power to change social narratives, and it's small changes that create ripple effects within our community and support others to see no barriers and dream bigger. So set your own goals and expectations. Don't compare yourself by others or be limited by their views. Everything is everything. So what is for you is for you. So don't hold back, rise to every opportunity. Try not to take yourself too seriously along the way and enjoy the journey. And like me, you might end up failing more times than you actually win. But as wise Oprah Winfrey once said, think like a queen. A queen is not afraid to fail, for failure is just another stepping stone to greatness. So happy International Women's Day. Let us continue to break the bias and break those barriers. Thank you.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Stephanie. That's such a lovely talk. You're going to have to do this talk over and over again now. Now you've written it out. You're going to have like, I want to see the outfits and the slides that go with this brilliant talk for when you start doing it all around the country now. We'll see more. I've got some comments for you. So yeah, it's fantastic. You nearly had me with your talking about your great aunt.
I nearly had myself, honestly. It's really hard to talk about. You know, without sort of those prep talks, you know, from those women that inspire us, you know, it literally means everything. And it changed my perception, because I did come out of pageantry with quite a negative perception on myself. And I'm sure others will, you know, relate to that fact where you get so close to something, you know, and there's nothing wrong with what you're doing. You're constantly applying yourself, but unfortunately that particular opportunity isn't for you. But like I said, I do believe everything is everything. So, you know, it wasn't for me to win, but I've taken what I can from that experience and I've applied it to everything that I do now.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's amazing. I mean, the fact that you're literally being judged, you can't get more for your body, your face, your hair, everything. You can't get braver than that. I can't think of many things that is braver than that in front of audiences. Katrine says, amazing, Stephanie, what a story. Thanks for sharing. Helen says, thank you to Stephanie. That was huge. Angela says, brilliant, Steph, so proud of you. Ellie says, all three of you are hugely inspirational. Thanks for sharing your stories. And Rebecca says, fantastic talk. Thank you for sharing with us and keep doing the awesome work that you're doing. And it's all echoed by everybody else. Lizzie says, amazing, Steph, queen of so much. And that's what She Says is all about, is that you come and tell your personal stories. This isn't really a platform to pitch, you know, your company or whatever, but, you know, that's fine. I think that the fact that we're all practicing as well, like we're all fairly new to speaking in this forum as well, and that this is a safer space for us to do this and experiment. It's just the beginning of more talks and more fun connections as well. So I'm going to wrap up. So thank you so much to all of our speakers, Stephanie, Emma and Rebecca. Thank you all of you for coming. There's a million other things you could be doing this evening, so thanks for joining us. I appreciate your time, and don't forget to check out all the events this month. WeSpringForward.com. There's